got very quiet. So
We're all
afraid to
thinking
be
about
on.
snakes, that's why.
Carol, we went to a funeral and the congregation sang, I come to the garden alone and I thought about you. Did you say you wanted that? You said,
I did, it's on my list. I told you the story about the preacher at Christ Church who hates that song. Did I tell you that one?
No.
It's not the guy who's there now, but I went to a funeral and they had that song and he said something about not liking it at all. So afterwards I said, is there something wrong theologically with that? What's up? He said, no. My first assignment after I got installed as a preacher was in an old people's home, and I sure got tired of it.
I guess so, yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to fishing. That's what we're going today.
Right.
Matthew chapter 17, 24 to 27, 3 long verses. We'll add a couple of things to that. Let's begin with prayer. Gracious Lord, again this day, as we come to your word, we ask you to open our hearts, open our lives. Help us to gaze into the relationship between you and Simon Peter. Help us to learn what we can learn about that in today's lesson. And help us to see what it can say to us in our relationship with you. We ask this in Jesus' most precious name. Amen. Well, I've given you some extra stuff since I had so much room on this page. I gave you some extra things. I thought some context might be helpful to see where we are in Jesus' life and ministry. This is according to St. Matthew's Gospel. So you see that I went as far back as Peter's confession of the Messiah. So I thought these were all important things to think about as we come to today's 3 short little verses. Remember, Peter said, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Would you say that's a high point in his life? High point or low point? High point? Okay. And then Jesus does his first passion prediction. Would you say that's a high point or low point in Jesus' life? In Peter's life, I'm sorry.
Low.
He doesn't understand.
From then on, Jesus began to point out to his disciples that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders, chief priests, and scribes, be killed, and be raised on the 3rd day. And from that then, we had, it was kind of fun, quote unquote, or not so fun, where Peter said to Jesus, "O Lord, this will never happen to you." And Jesus turned and told him, "Get behind me, Satan. You're a hindrance to me because you're not thinking about God's concerns, but human concerns." If the passion prediction was low, the retort to Simon Peter would be extra low, I guess. I mean, low, I don't know. Then comes what I would call clarification 1, where Jesus clarifies what it means to take up your cross. I'm reading from verse 24. "If anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life because of me will find it. For what will it benefit someone if he gains the whole world, yet loses his life? Or what will anyone give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will reward each one according to what he has done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." So this first clarification, well, all of them will actually cause concern and misunderstanding on the disciples. But what follows immediately after that is the Transfiguration. And we looked at that last week, so I won't read anything from that, at least today. Then would you say that's a high point, a low point, or a what point?
High.
I'm going to call it mixed,
Okay.
because they were terrified.
But they were up on the mountain.
I mean, so I don't know. I think emotions are all over the place in that. Wouldn't you think? I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's really high. Wow, this is great. But on the other hand, whoa. I don't know. That's a tough one. Chapter 17, 14 to 21, Jesus' power over the demonic. I just have a little bit of a quote there. I like verse 20. This is after the disciples haven't been able to drive out, and Jesus has done this, and the disciples asked Jesus, well, why couldn't we do it? because of your little faith. Remember little faith we talked about before? For truly I tell you, if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, and you tell this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. So that's kind of an interesting one. High, low, in between, all over the place. What do you think? You're not going to say anything because I messed you up on the last one. I would say. Then comes second passion prediction. The two verses right before our text. As a matter of fact, I gave those to you there. I thought, we could put them there on the text on your page. As they were gathering together in Galilee, Jesus told them, the Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised up. And they were deeply distressed. Not just distressed, but deeply distressed. That's interesting to me. Deeply distressed. Then comes the paying of the temple tax. How many Gospels will we find this in? It's numbers between 1 and 4. It's got to be at least one, right? Because it's in this one.
Or we wouldn't know about it at all if it weren't in at least one.
So what do you think? Numbers 1 to 4. If you say not 1, you are correct. It's only in 1. And so the one question, why do you think Mark, Luke, nor John wrote about this? Or you could flip it. Why do you think Matthew wrote about this?
He was a tax collector.
Yeah.
And Luke wouldn't, that's not Luke's thing. He's the physician, he writes all these other things.
Sorry, I didn't actually hear a thing.
I said
I'm
Matthew
turning
was
up
a
my
tax
hearing aids to
collector,
full.
right? And Luke was a physician, he writes all these other issues. You know.
John only writes about love, and that's not about love.
Oh, well, it's not all about
James
love.
has got it philosophically. So.
He writes about other stuff too.
I know.
Interesting. Okay. So, this is going to take place in Simon Peter's adopted hometown of Capernaum. You can see that in verse 24. Once they get there, it appears they go back to Simon Peter's home. Would you grant that, do you think? Verse 25, when he went into the house, I'm guessing that's Simon Peter's house. I'm guessing, I think it's fair since that's where they seem to go a lot. It seems natural then that if anyone's going to write about tax stuff, it's going to be a tax collector. So, I don't know. So we already did high points and low points, lower points, all of that. So, let's see. We looked at that. They were greatly distressed. That's in verse, deeply distressed, I'm sorry. In verse 23, that's a pretty strong emotion, you think? Pretty strong. All of these things that happened before this, I would think would be kind of rolling through Simon Peter's mind as they're walking and coming into Capernaum. He's going to think about high points and low points, things that he said that he probably wished he wouldn't have said. You've never had things that you said that you wish you wouldn't have said, have you? Oh, we won't go to those. Emotions and thoughts all over the place. Maybe there's some comfort because Jesus is talking about raising from the dead. However, like if you read Mark chapter 9, verse 10, when they're coming down from Mount of Transfiguration, they're questioning what rising from the dead meant, so I don't think they truly understood that. And so there's all this roller coaster, these emotions going on, and they come to Capernaum. I can see him in my mind at least walking down the narrow alleyway past the synagogue into Simon Peter's house. What are some of the things that happened in that house that we've talked about or that you know happened? Anything that you can remember that's happened there that they might think about as they come here?
I don't know if it already happened, but his mother-in-law was sick.
Already happened. Mother-in-law was sick, and what did Jesus do? Said, great. Bye? No.
Said, we're hungry, get up and fix us some lunch.
Exactly.
It was like Esau and Jacob.
Yeah.
And then the follow-up to that, what happened? Everybody, after sunset, remember after sunset, that was the Sabbath, after sunset, they all came because it was no longer Sabbath, brought all these people. Can you imagine all the people come into your house? Jesus, we hear he's been healing. Come. What else has happened in this house? This kind of headquarters that we know of.
Did they lower the guy down?
It's already
from the
happened.
bridge?
All of it, it's already happened.
Okay.
Guy was lowered down. Why was he lowered down?
Because
With
it was too crowded at the door.
Yeah.
The line was too
So
long.
that's happened too. Do you think he thought about that? I always wondered what Mrs. Simon Peter would think about that. You know, you're messing up my roof. Depending on how well they fixed it, you know, if it leaked. Remember this? You could just see that going on. I don't know. All of that stuff happening. And so the other thing to remember is we've had 2 passion predictions now. And there's uncertainty. What's going to happen to Jesus? All of this isn't fun and games. They're hearing that Jesus is going to suffer and die. It's going to weigh heavily on them. They've been on a trip. They're coming back home. And they were deeply distressed in verse 23. And they come into Capernaum. And isn't it interesting as when they come in, what happens? Verse 24. Those who collected the temple tax approached Peter and said, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?" What do you know about temple tax?
Went to the Levites, right?
So it's interesting. You can see the word that's there. Drachman, a double drachma, which is a levy of 2 drachmas collected from Israelite males every year for the temple. Now, I looked this up because I'll be honest, it's not at the top of my knowledge information. Every year, every male Israelite, so that would be someone who's gone through their bar mitzvah, included proselytes, people, were expected to pay an annual tax of a half a shekel, or in our money, about 35 cents. It wasn't compulsory, like a government tax. It was voluntary, and no one could be compelled to pay. And I find that interesting. You couldn't be compelled to pay, but the question that's asked is asked in a way that expects what type of answer? Isn't it expecting a positive answer?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's not does he or doesn't he? And so it's due in what would be the month of Adar, which is our March. This is about 6 months after that, most people think. But they'd been out of Galilee for much of that time, and that's why the question comes. And it has to be paid in the ancient money of Israel, the regular half shekel of the treasury. And so remember, Jesus gets money changers angry at him. What are they changing? They are changing money for this type of thing. And so it's interesting that if you go down that rabbit hole off that direction, the discount rate they could charge, they could make about 4 or 5 cents on every half shekel they do. And so that's estimated to be nearly $45,000, which is pretty good money, especially in a country where how much did the average laborer receive? In our money today, it'd be about 20 cents for a day's labor. Can you imagine that? The Good Samaritan, remember all that he left? About 35 cents of stuff, according to the last source I looked at. So when Jesus turned over the money changers' tables, he was attacking a powerful, a wealthy interest who obviously did not want something to happen. But look at Simon's answer. Yes, the question they ask expects a positive answer. It's almost like, your teacher pays the temple tax, doesn't he? So is he going to pay or not? Because what does this say about him? Is he going to be pro-temple or anti-temple? What do you think he said yes? Was it a well thought out answer?
No.
Or was it, I'm going to say something
It was
fast?
of course. Of course.
This is Peter.
Yeah, of course.
Except, here's something else I guess I haven't said yet. Religious teachers were not expected, let me say it correctly, to pay this tax. So religious teachers were not expected. And so he says yes without, I think it's classic Simon Peter, without thinking. He answers before he thinks it through. So commentators have two different things they say about this. It's kind of fun. Some say that Simon is saying what he knows, that in the past Jesus had paid the tax, and then he assumes that Jesus will continue to do so. Or others suggest, and I think this is what I think is true, Simon Peter just acts on his own assumptions without any prior knowledge, impulsively, Simon-like, defends his teacher from possible criticism, and we've seen that part of Simon Peter before. And remember, just getting back home, it's been a long trip, they're up and down, and immediately he's confronted with this. It's almost like he answers it automatically, as conditioned, but of course he does, because that's what a good Jewish boy, a good Jewish man would do. Is this ever talked about anyplace else? We've never heard of Jesus paying this tax, because we've never heard much at all about the tax, believe it. It was voluntary on the first place, and religious leaders, teachers are exempted from it. It's not a Roman tax, although interestingly, after 70 AD, what's the important thing about 70 AD in history?
No.
It's
The temple.
Jerusalem is.
Yeah, the Jewish people are out of Jerusalem, the temple is gone. The Romans took over this tax, they appropriated the tax. You know, once there's a tax, it never goes away, right? That's pretty much the way it is. And so they appropriated this tax to support a new Roman temple. Jupiter Capitolinus or something like that. And so I think the other thing that's interesting is that something has changed in how Jesus is being approached now. Something has changed in Capernaum. Jesus' reputation is not what it was before. And I think tired, they come in and suddenly have to deal with this situation.
I have a question. Didn't the other Jewish men have to pay it, like Peter and Andrew and James and John?
Again, it is a voluntary tax, but the expectation would be yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a whole lot. Well, it's like a half day's wage, which is, I don't know. But you know, the wages we have today and the wealth we have today, it's hard for us to really understand, I think, that culture because there is so little and all of that. So continuing on in verse 25, when he, that Simon Peter, went into the house, Jesus spoke to him first. What do you think, Simon? From whom do earthly kings collect tariffs or taxes? From their sons or from strangers? Tariffs, notice there are two different words used there. Tariffs is an interesting word. A tax levied on goods or services rather than on persons or organizations. It's almost like a sales tax today, I guess you'd say, almost, right? And then kensos, a tax, a poll tax, a tax paid directly by a person or organization to whom it is levied, especially paid by individuals yearly, would be like our income tax now, I guess, right? That's the best way I can put it. So, how would you answer the question? From whom do earthly kings collect tariffs or taxes? From their sons or from strangers?
I don't think Prince Charles pays tax.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
None of them pay, none of the royal family
I don't
pays
think so.
tax?
They get money, they don't give money.
You don't have to pay taxes on any of that.
I don't think so.
Well, it's now a constitutional monarchy, right? Or no, it's not really a monarchy. It's more, I don't know. Would you expect the sons to pay taxes? No, you'd expect strangers, right? Strangers is an interesting word. Notice it's an adjective, first of all. A person who does not belong in the environment in which they are found. I like that. I don't know who wrote that up. It was kind of fun. A person who does not belong there. So it's somebody from the outside. I would say outsider almost, right? So it's insiders or outsiders. The outsiders are the ones that we are expecting to pay. So what is this conversation about? This is, well, first of all, it's unique. We don't find it anyplace else. Jesus says, then the sons are free. But so we won't offend them, go to the sea, cast in a fishhook, and take the first fish that you catch. When you open its mouth, you'll find a coin. Take it and give it to them for me and you. We assume that's what he does, right? Does it say that he caught the fish? No, it doesn't say it. It's interesting that Matthew doesn't deal with that aspect. Doesn't say, oh, by the way, he caught the fish. Interestingly, this is the only time I believe that a fish hook is spoken about and used in this way in the Gospels. How do they usually fish?
Nets.
That's what we hear about all the time, right? But
But he just
apparently
needed
there
one.
are hooks there. I'm sorry?
He just needed one fish. So it was a lot of trouble to cast a net for one fish.
But he apparently had a fish hook,
Yeah.
probably on some type of line, takes it, throws it in, catches one. We assume he opens it up and goes, wow, there's the exact coin that we need. You will find a coin, stater is what it is, a 4 drachma coin. Guess what? It's the exact size that he needs to pay for 2 individuals their tax. So what do you do with this thing then? What's it here? Why is it here? Obviously, you could say Jesus does, Jesus provides for the need. But isn't it interesting, verse 27, so we won't offend them. How many times has Jesus offended people?
Oh,
The religious leaders. I mean, doesn't that kind of, you go, what? What's this about? It's interesting. It almost seems out of place. And he doesn't.
You don't know who the them is here. I mean, maybe he means the common man who needs to not say, well, he doesn't pay it, so I'm not paying it.
Anybody else? What do you think? Why not offend now? This is me. I'm wondering. I'm just saying what I think. You can do whatever you want. It almost seems like we've been on a long journey. We're coming back. We would have a little time off to rest and relax. This will get these guys out. We don't have to have another argument over stuff and go on and on and on. And this very well may be the last time they're all together here in Capernaum, because they're going to start going toward Jerusalem next, and for Jesus to suffer and die. And so it could be, it's just, let's get it taken care of, get them out of here so they won't bother us. But again, it's unusual that they are asking Jesus, especially Jesus, because Jesus is a religious teacher who is exempt from a voluntary tax. And they go ahead and ask him. So it says something about Jesus and how people are beginning to treat him. There's more opposition seeming to come up against him. But the other thing that's fascinating is they want to know about Jesus, so who do they go and talk to? There are 12 guys. Who would you choose to talk to? Why did they go to Simon Peter? If you want to talk to Jesus, you talk to Simon Peter. So apparently that was fairly well known there in that point. Dr. Gibbs, it's not a guy on TV. Some of you think about that. Whenever I see that, it's actually Dr. Jeffrey Gibbs. He was a prophet at St. Louis Seminary. I think he's the head of the Bible Museum now, if I remember right. He wrote the commentary, the Concordia commentary on this, and he says he thinks this story is here for verse 26. The whole thing's about sons and strangers. And he wants you to think about this. We are now getting close to where Jesus is going to suffer and die. Therefore, is a temple with its sacrificial system needed? No? And so it's all dealing with that aspect that, Jesus is Jesus a son? He's the Son of God. What are the other son things that you can come up with Jesus? Son of God, son of Abraham, son of man, son of David. All of those are used, right? So he's the son. He's the son of the king of the universe, right? So you wouldn't expect him to have to pay. But the thing that Gibbs throws in, and he says that by paying for Simon Peter's, he's showing that Simon is now one of the sons as well. There's the song that we used to sing years ago. I don't know if you've ever sung Sons of God, Here's Holy Word, Children of God type thing. And so he's saying that because of who his disciples are, they are almost in that place as well. They're no longer outsiders, but they're insiders, part of God's kingdom. And so they aren't responsible for that as well. That's why Gibbs says this is there. And he says the other thing you have to look at is the first, I lost my page there. Where'd you go? Is the first verses 24, there it is, verse 22 and 23. That this whole thing there, that fits in as well. That Jesus' passion predictions are fitting in, and that Jesus is focusing on his passion, his suffering and death, and that's why he's saying that these folks would be part of that as well. That's what Gibbs says. But it's interesting that it's here and that Matthew just kind of drops it in and then goes on and doesn't really help us understand all of why it's there. I don't know. What do you think? Anything else you could say on that? This is the quietest you've ever been. And I'm going to read you a quote then. This is from Dr. Gibbs himself. Herein I would suggest, with others, lies the connection in the second passion prediction, although the theology remains latent and only explicit at the point in Matthew's gospel, because Jesus is about to be handed over and killed and raised from the dead on the third day, that's 17, 22, and 23, God no longer requires or even desires for his people to provide animals and supplies for the sacrifices of atonement at the temple. Jesus himself possesses by divine right the status of son that exempts him from any thought of needing the atoning sacrifices. In him and his reign of God ministry, something greater than the temple is here. He himself is Emmanuel, God with us. That's chapter 1, verse 23. To be specific, now present in Jesus is the reality toward which the atoning sacrifices have always pointed, namely the Son of Man who will give his life as a ransom payment for many. Moreover, because Jesus' disciples are now following him in faith, even if it is little faith, as he moves towards the completion of his ministry, they already possess the status of sons and are in no way bound by God, the King, to support the temple offerings and animal sacrifices. They are, in that sense, free. And that's what it says. Then the sons are free. That's the end of the Gibbs quote. I thought I'd give it to you in Gibbs' words than Jim's translation of Gibbs. I know how to get the group quiet today.
It's very confusing, I think.
Okay, let me pour out a couple more things, and we might finish early today. Oh yeah, got that to go through. Okay, all right, let's see. Again, offending. We won't offend them. That's an amazing thing, because Jesus often offended He didn't go out of his way to offend, but he stood ground. And here he could stand ground as being a religious teacher, as actually a son, as he says, not to have to pay it. But he apparently doesn't want to push it at this time. Again, I think it's because it's been a long trip. This is probably the last time they'll all be together in Capernaum. And so instead, they are going to let it go and enjoy the time before they begin that final journey. And I think, the idea that maybe Jesus just needed a little time off, according to his human nature. If the disciples had all these high and low moments, could Jesus, according to his human nature, have high and low moments too? I would think he could. I would think it would be very difficult for some of these things. But think about what it says about the relationship between Jesus and Simon Peter. Jesus is taking care of Simon Peter's need here, if you will. He takes care of it in a way which is miraculous and just kind of zooms right by it. And instead, I think it's more so that they can just have time to hang out and be friends before the final march to Jerusalem. I don't think this text is in any of the, I'll have to double check, but I don't think this is one of those that we read and on a Sunday morning when we do Series A. I think this part's just kind of zipped right over, I think, because I never remember this in a sermon that I've ever done or I've ever heard of anyone doing. I don't remember it. Now, maybe you do, I don't know. But there are certain things that they just kind of skip over, and this is one of those, perhaps. But the thing that's interesting is that it's unique, and it's in Matthew's Gospel. And it's kind of unique with, a fish with a coin. Have you ever caught a fish with a coin in its mouth?
And not the first one that you get to. It says the first, you drop your hook in, the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and there's exactly what you need, and it's exactly what will cover the tax. Yeah.
Should have done, this, I'm sorry, being silly, but it came to mind. That reminds me of Old Testament in Jonah where the fish spits him out. Actually, it literally vomits him out.
Yeah.
So the fish couldn't, why didn't Jesus go down there and the fish, here comes the coin, catch it. It's like, I'm being silly now, I understand that, but it's interesting. Matthew leaves out the actual miracle. It's inferred, but he leaves it out. Michael Card wrote this. This is the last paragraph on this chapter. I found it interesting. I'll share it with you as well. Once upon a time, 2 tired servants of God stumbled back home to find no longer the faithful, but instead demanding religious people waiting for them at the door. Knowing that the least indiscretion would mean more conflict for both of them, one chose to exercise his awesome and unlimited power to make appear out of nowhere a couple of dollars to pay the fee the men at the door were hounding them for. All this for the glorious purpose that the 2 of them might share an uninterrupted evening together of talk and meal fellowship, since in a few days they would be leaving that place, never to return. He makes a few assumptions there, but they're probably accurate assumptions, that they will leave this place, never to return. And maybe it was just to have some quiet time. Do you like to have quiet time at home in the midst of all the busy travel and everything? Have you ever been on a trip and you come home? Is it nice to kind of sit back, put your feet up, and not have all sorts of stuff, not having the tax man at your door say, you're going to pay the tax now, or something like that? So maybe it's just as simple as that. Maybe that's why the other gospel writers didn't leave it. It's interesting again that Mark didn't write it. Peter could have told him this part. He said, I'll just leave it out maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure why. Anything else you want to talk about this one? Or anything else like that? It's a holiday weekend. Your minds are on other things.
Actually, I had a theme come up this week. In several things that I was reading, it was on the topic of mercy versus justice, not versus, mercy and justice. Back in Micah, where was it Micah, the one just before the 400 years, that's Micah, right?
Okay.
Where he talks about let justice like a river flow. Well, the one was saying we Americans have a hard time with the idea of justice because we have a pretty good justice system. And so when you use the word justice, that's what we tend to think about. But that's not what the Bible's talking about. He's talking about kind of what you talk about. Justice is conducting your life in such a way that it's pleasing to the Lord. Telling everybody about your love for him, etc., etc. And I never would have thought of that as part of justice, but it's justice in the sense that justice meaning in the Bible being the same way to others as you are to yourself. In other words, whatever you want out of life,
Okay.
justice means you want them to have it too. I thought that was interesting.
Well, maybe not what you want out of life, but what God would want you
Them
to
to have
want
us.
out of
Exactly.
life. Because otherwise
Exactly.
we could go really wacko.
Yes, that's right.
That was a theological word, wacko.
It's only used by Matthew.
No, it's only used by Jim.
Immediately.
So after this, let me read just a little bit. So this ends with this sentence, take it and give it to them for me and you. And then chapter 18. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, so who is greatest in the kingdom of heaven? So isn't this interesting that the things that we've looked at, we had the second passion prediction. We have this. After every passion prediction, there's going to be the misunderstanding what he's talking about. And so, who is the greatest? You know, that's not what they need to be talking about. And instead, Jesus brings a little child, a small child, and has him stand among them. And some suggest this was a child of Peter's, but it doesn't say that. We don't know that. Things like that. And so then this chapter continues on with, we have the parable of the lost sheep, we have the restoration of a brother, we have parable of an unforgiving sinner, and so there are lots of things that come after this. And it's just kind of, I don't know, this little section is just kind of stuck there and you go, huh, exactly why.
The business about James and John wanting to know who was the greatest. Do you think their mother put them up to that? I mean, can you picture that? I'm not asking you if you know, obviously, but
I don't, nothing.
I've always wondered if she stirred them up. Because guys don't usually think that way as much as gals, I think.
Well,
Jacob and Esau's mother stirred
She did.
Jacob up.
That's true. She certainly did. Yep.
but one thing that you could, if it's what Gibbs is talking about is true, and I think he has something there, that the sons, that because of who the disciples are and their relationship with Jesus, that they now are like having this place of privilege. So if we have this place of privilege, so which one of us is the greatest, you know? Who is the greatest? One of us here, type thing. And they have trouble with understanding what Jesus is talking about, which I think I could understand, when he does a prediction of his suffering and death. And then they go off on these strange tangents of, you know, trying to make sense of it. Of course, I don't know what strange tangent you or I might make if we had been there. I don't think my personality is not one that I would speak before thinking like Simon Peter does. I'd probably be standing in the background going, I don't know, something like that. What? And letting Simon take the lead and go, okay, maybe we'll learn it that way.
So
Because
you
it
see yourself
seems
as
like
Andrew.
most of the disciples, at least, you know, we don't have very many disciples talking, at least that we have quotes from.
Right.
Simon Peter, first of all, probably John be next, I suppose, maybe James, You get past that, there are few words. I mean, Thomas actually comes out with a couple. You know, in John 14, when Jesus is talking about, in my Father's house, it's Thomas who asks the question, you know, we don't know where you're going, so how do we know the way? And then, of course, the most famous thing of Thomas is when he is disbelieving Thomas, not doubting Thomas, disbelieving Thomas. That's the most famous quote.
What's the difference to you between disbelieving and doubting?
They're different words.
They're different words,
They're
but what's the
different.
meaning?
No, they're different
to you?
words in Greek. Completely different words. Doubt, disbelieving means he does not have faith in something. It's taking the word faith and putting the alpha in front of it, meaning I do not believe. Doubting is more of levels. You're doubting it might be kind of like this, schwaffling. Can I use that? There's another fun word, schwaffling, back and forth. So it's a different
So
word.
is disbelieving to you, because you keep defending him often, is disbelieving a better place to be than doubting? I mean, neither sounds too positive.
Well, my point with Thomas is that he doesn't ask for anything
More than the
more
other.
than, isn't it?
I
More
know.
than what Jesus
I know.
had already given the other disciples. Because when Jesus showed up, he said to them, here's my hand, here's my side. It doesn't say that they poked, but if Jesus says, here it is, my guess, it's just my guess, is that they might have at least looked pretty close if they don't do that. And it's interesting that the one we give the hard time to then is Thomas, for asking for the very same thing that Jesus freely gave the other folks.
Maybe we should give him a hard time for not having been there the first time with the other 11. Where was he?
Don't know why he wasn't there. Doesn't say that. But the reason I say disbelieve as opposed to doubt, maybe it's the same general area, but it's more accurate to the original text, is all I'm saying. And I don't know, it's an interesting difference. What do you say, since we're on that area, when Simon Peter and John ran to the empty tomb? Were they doubting that he was alive, or were they disbelieving? What do you think their response was?
He disbelieved the women.
I think they just wanted proof.
Yeah, I would wonder if they weren't really frightened too. What?
Yeah.
I just wanted to know what happened. What the truth was.
To me, disbelieving, in these particular cases at least, indicates that I don't believe you. In other words, you told me something, I don't believe it. I'm not doubting Jesus. I'm not doubting what he can do,
Interesting.
but I'm disbelieving you.
So when Thomas is disbelieving, he's disbelieving what the disciples have said, that Jesus is alive. It comes down to the same point, I guess. It is interesting that when Jesus shows up, it doesn't say that Thomas put his fingers in, right? It just says, my Lord and my God. Oh, it's interesting. And that's an interesting quote, too. So, I'm hearing music. Are you hearing music?
Yeah.
It's not just me.
No, don't worry.
Good old Luther song.
I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you a story and then it will be over. Several years ago, before I had hearing aids, before I had this hearing issue, which makes it today's gospel is interesting, I woke up one day and couldn't hear. Accurate, Cindy? And so we went to the doctor, 90%, something like that one, hearing loss. Just woke up overnight. And so the doctor said, we're sending you to an audiologist, an ENT guy. Sent me to an ENT guy that day, and they tested me, and that's when I guess they said 90% no. And so it was autoimmune. I always think autoimmune is when they don't know what else to say, but that's just me again. And so, it gave me this stuff, primarily, they were steroids to help with that good thing. And so slowly sound came back. And I got most of it back, I think. I don't know if I don't think what I have now has anything to do with it. Maybe it is or something. But hearing that made me think. I remember being on steroids. Steroids sometimes make you kind of have some angst and all. And so I would go down to the basement for a while, just leave me alone, let me go. Didn't act out right, just wanted to get away from people. And we had this old couch down there. I lay down on the couch and closed my eyes. And I heard several times a soprano singing in the background. I could not quite make out the words. Our daughter is a soprano. I kept checking if and no, she never did that. And so I remember the next time I saw the ENT, I said, I had this. Have you ever had anybody say this? And he did one of these kind of like, no. And I never told him about it again. It happened a couple other times. But so when I hear that, that's why I asked the question. Am I hearing things or that thing? But it was very strange. It was beautiful. It was beautiful soprano music, and it was just almost like you couldn't quite hear the words. They were there, but I couldn't quite get them. And that's way off topic, but that's why I asked. We're going to close with a prayer. Let you go. We get out a few minutes early. We'll continue next week with a little more stuff coming up, I think. So, Heavenly Father, we pray that you would be with us as we still think about this text and try to figure out all that it means to us. Maybe we could focus on the fact that we're your children and that we have that special place of privilege with you through faith in Christ, our relationship with him, being this close to him. So help us, we pray, that we might always have that we might always remain close to you as your children, sons and daughters of the King, until you take us home to be with you forever and ever. Help us not doubt or disbelieve, but fully trust in you alone. We ask this in Jesus' most precious name. Amen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our class is over.